Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dojo Live. Today is Tuesday, September 7th, 2021. I'm Tulio Siragusa, broadcasting from Southern California, and I'm joined by Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico, and Carlos Ponce in Cuernavaca, Mexico.
Hello.
And of course, our guest, Pramod Raheja, also known as Mod. Nice to for you to join us. Is the CEO and co-founder of Airgility, joining us just outside of, just north of Virginia. Thanks for joining us today. It's good to have you as our guest. And we're talking about robotics and AI today. You know, a lot of people have this fantasy about robots and AI taking over the world. That's mostly fantasy, but there's other value for AI and robotics, like valuable things that can improve our lives right now, today, in practical ways. So we're going to dig in and see what we can learn today. But before we do that, let's get to know our guest a little bit. Pramod, please introduce yourself. Thanks for
Hey,
being with
thank
us.
you. Yes, as Tulio mentioned, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Airgility. I go by Mode, and happy to be here. Thank you for having me today. I have been sort of, I want to say, immersed or passionate about anything future tech since I was a little kid. Mostly spaceships and airplanes adorned my walls from about age 4 or 5 onwards. And so my pedigree kind of followed that path. Went to an engineering and science school and actually did aerospace projects as my projects typically. Got followed up with a aerospace engineering degree. I have probably now at this point, as you get older, lots and lots of experience in aviation operations and aerospace in various capacities, from the business side to actually the flying side to the engineering side at this point as well. And that all parlayed into what I'm doing now, which I'll talk about in a minute.
All right. Well, thanks for giving us a little background. What is it that you're doing now? What does Airgility do? What gave birth to this idea?
Yeah, so a few years ago, so a little more background on me, which I didn't say, is I'm a serial entrepreneur of about 25 years. I've started a number of businesses, and at the University of Maryland, which I'm an alumni of, sits in any research university, in fact, sits something called an entrepreneur in residence. And they are typically there, they're experienced entrepreneurs, and they're there to help faculty and students start businesses. So in many cases, out of universities come great ideas and great intellectual property. And typically, if a faculty wants to start a business out of that, the university essentially claims ownership to the initial intellectual property because it came under their umbrella, right? That's sort of normal, works at most universities. But every now and then, maybe more often these days, that faculty member or researcher wants to start a business. So my co-founder and our CTO of our company, Evandro Valente, was a faculty member at Maryland. He had created some intellectual property and was starting to work on it. And EIR at the time was somebody I knew, and he said, "Hey, if you're going to start a company, you're going to need a good co-founder and CEO." And that's how. So we had an arranged marriage, basically. That's how we started the company in 2007, middle of 2017, and we started with really nothing, just his ideas, a prototype that was starting to get built, but there was no business model, there was no product to sell just yet. It truly is the story of something from nothing, where we created from scratch and kind of pivoted and found our way around into what we're doing now, which I'll talk about obviously on the show.
So what does the company actually do today?
Yeah, so we do artificial intelligence. We build artificial intelligence and autonomous robotic systems, unmanned robotic systems, really. And that could be ground, air, and sea. We happen to have a lot of pedigree with aerial, what we call aerial assets, or what most of the audience probably knows as drones, is where most of our experience is. However, we've done some ground prototypes too. And so we kind of play in all those areas. However, we are truly experts on drones.
Okay, we have to dig in and see what we can learn today. So much in that space,
Yeah.
not intended. I know Uber's testing some self-flying autonomous vehicles. I mean, there's a lot of things going on there.
We can talk about that.
Let's go right into it. Let's kick off the conversation today. Kim, please introduce the topic and let's see what we can learn.
Yeah, thank you for being here with us today, Pramod. It's nice to meet you and to learn about Airgility. The topic as chosen by you is AI and robotics on the edge. How does layering in AI on the edge of robotic systems save lives, improve efficiency, and simply return on ROI for the stakeholder? So the question for today is, so why that topic? Why did you choose this topic? Why is it timely?
So it's very timely because when we talk about artificial intelligence, I'll use a Tesla as a simple example. Not everybody has been in a Tesla, but they're in the news these days. So most people have seen a Tesla, know a little bit about it, know that there's some sort of autopilot, etc., and that it's maybe caused a couple accidents, maybe not, probably debatable. But the bottom line is your car, as it's that Tesla, and actually many other cars these days, as they're driving on the roads, they are collecting tons and tons of data. So when you stop at a red light, that's a data point. When somebody crosses the street, that's a data point. Okay, that looks like a person. Or I'm driving and there's a truck next to me. Oh, that looks like a truck. And so millions and millions of data points now get collected into the brain of the car, the brain really of Tesla, and then that gets dispersed into how they make the software and make the software smarter. So in the same vein, we're doing that with drones. We're actually putting in both autonomous artificial intelligence, which means I'm a drone. I have a little brain in my little drone body, and I'm going to make sure that I don't hit anything. Just like the Tesla. Tesla, if you're driving on autopilot, theoretically, it should avoid all objects, right? So it's the same thing here with the drone. That's more the navigation specific, we'll call it. But then now there's more the mission specific. Okay, I'm on a mission, and an example would be I am trying to find somebody that might be alive in a search and rescue situation. And I am the drone, I'm the robot here. There's no humans around me. I need to go do this. Or it's too dangerous and we don't have somebody that can come in here just yet. Or I need to go and lead the team before they come in and I need to tell them where to go. So I, the drone, with a fusion of algorithms and sensors, can see that maybe somebody's alive under that rubble by using an infrared camera as an example, or a Wi-Fi finder where somebody's with their cell phone and they're trying to send a signal out. We can detect that. And so those are just a couple different examples. There's other means, but that's one way of an ROI of saving human lives on the public safety. I'll call on the public safety side of things.
I would love to unfold some of the applications. Years ago, I worked with an industrial design firm that was looking for an easy way to track apple orchard crops. Apparently, in huge farms of apple orchard, if something goes bad, you can lose an entire crop. And so they manually travel up and down thousands of acres to track this stuff. And with drones and cameras and sensors, they can actually monitor this proactively. So I've seen some of the application in agriculture and agro-tech. What are some of the applications that are evolving today that you're noticing?
Yeah, so one area that we are becoming specialists in is inspections. So imagine, and specifically inspections in dangerous places. We like to call it, there's a whole bunch of D's there: dangerous, distant, dull. These D's, I'll use that terminology. And what I mean by that is, imagine a tank or a nuclear facility or something where it's probably pretty hazardous for humans to go. And that's what the status quo is. Hey, I got to go climb this ladder that's, a couple hundred feet up, or which I can show you pictures of. and I don't know that any of us would really want to climb that ladder, right? So the drone can go do that. It can go fly up. And wow. Not only that, forget just having a drone just to be an eye in the sky. We can design it to be autonomous, where it's flying a predefined path. And it is, looking for something specific. In the case of an inspection, maybe it's looking for infrastructure that could fail. And I'll give you an example of about maybe 2 or 3 months ago now, it might be 4 months, in fact. There was a bridge in either Alabama or Arkansas, and I'm sure we Google this, we'll find it, that collapsed. And they had paid a small engineering firm to fly their drone around this bridge to look for signs of whatever, erosion or cracks and things like that. So the way that things are done today is that drone flew around, and then the engineering firm took their SD card out of the drone and put it into their computer And now they have 5 hours of footage they got to go through. Guess what happens if you have 5 hours of footage and you're a human? It's probably pretty boring, and you're looking for that needle in the haystack, right? And you might miss something. And guess what? In that case, the engineer did miss something. And so if they'd watched the video properly, they would have seen that there was a crack there, a big crack that they should have caught. And unfortunately, the bridge collapsed, after all that. However, if you layer in AI, the AI could tell you right then and there, hey, there's a crack here. You might want to pay attention to this. And then we can actually send a video right then and there to the operator. The key here is, of course, you have to have a trained and labeled data set. And what do I mean by that? Just like in your brain, we know that one car is a Honda and another car is a Tesla. We already have labeling in our heads. So you have to train the computer to do that as well.
I have a question. I imagine this training is, what's the word? Transmissible? I don't know. Like, it's software and it's data that you have, and you can hook up to any actual drone. So let's say that individual drone is destroyed, there's an explosion, the bridge collapses, it's crushed, whatever. You don't lose that data, right? There's cloud, and you can put that into another set of machinery, unlike, let's say, an individual where we get paid because we're an expert, because we've gained all of this knowledge, yet we can just become more and more, these drones can become greater and greater experts regardless of what happens to the physical entity.
Yeah, that software can be aggregated, right? So you could even theoretically, to build upon your point, you could have, again, just going back to the Tesla example, thousands of drones in the field, and they're all pushing their data back to central place, whether it's to the cloud or what have you. Most likely it is, and it's being pushed to a central place and then aggregated and trained, right? So you're getting all these data points. So it doesn't have to be off of one drone; it could be off of many drones. And yeah, if that one drone crashes or something, the data is most likely, depending on if you stored it on the drone itself and there's a card, if it's retrievable, or if you're pushing it to the cloud. In most cases, you are or can, and so there you have the data.
And can that be real-time data, like in high tense situations where it's fast, it's going from between drone to drone to drone?
So
network?
Yeah. So go ahead.
I guess that's the promise of 5G, right? Is that every drone could be an IoT device.
Yeah, depending on how your what your communication methods are would really depend on that answer. But what I was going to basically say was that that data. The question you asked was around really, can you get some information real time? And the answer is yes. So in our case, in many situations, people want a real time video feed and they want to be looking at everything. That takes a lot of bandwidth and a lot of computational power, which means a lot of battery. So you're using a lot of energy. What we're saying here is there are many situations where you don't need to look at dull, boring video for hours upon hours. Only be notified when you really need to. Think about a security setting where you have the old, if you remember and they still have this, the security guy in the guard shack, and he's got 6 cameras he's got to look at. Is he looking at all 6 of those cameras? Is he doing his homework from night school? I don't know what he's doing. These days he's on his cell phone, probably doing social media. So think about that. You don't need to look at all that video, but you do need to know if, hey, somebody's trying to hop the fence, or somebody's trying to unlock that door, or somebody got within 5 feet of the perimeter, whatever the criteria is for that organization, that can be trained to be AI. That now the guard is sitting there, but they're being proactive when they're told, hey, there's something going on here. There's a breach. You need to go check this out. We're actually talking to organizations both in the military and outside of the military about these security applications where you have something on the ground. It could be a camera. It could be in some cases it could be a robot dog or a little robot like you guys were showing me earlier. And it could be that, hey, I see something, and then it automatically sends a message to a flying drone to say, hey, come take an overhead look here. Right. And then if you see something, let's go ahead and let the real human know what's going on. Maybe, that's just one scenario, but those are scenarios that are actually the future.
Pramod, it's interesting that we're discussing a technology that, well, at least yours, that was inspired initially by a cartoon character, right?
Yeah.
Cat dog.
Yeah. Hey, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. So the drone that we have right now that we've launched into the market as a product and I didn't say this earlier, but it can also fly into any situation anywhere, including GPS denied environments, which is kind of a big deal these days, autonomously, by the way. But yeah, so it has 2 sections on it, which means you can have 2 types of payloads and 2 different things, which also makes it fairly unique. So we have a strong intern culture within our company in terms of we have great relationships with the University of Maryland and Virginia Tech and Northeastern University in Boston. And and so they named it the Cat Dog, some of our interns. Now, we can't use that publicly because that's actually a trademark name, but internally we call it the Cat Dog.
Cool.
I had to Google that. It's a bit before my time, I think.
Yeah, back then I know what Cat Dog is because I have a kid, so he knows what a cartoon is. So it was kind of creepy, right? To have one animal in 2 animals in one body. It was like,
that's right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But anyway, I understand the concept, so thank you. Before I pass it on to, sorry, Kim, just one more thing.
No, go for it.
Yeah, I realize that our viewers and ourselves, we're all familiar with the drones and with high-end robotics because we know the space. We've had a lot of conversations on Dojo Live, but there just might be someone out there who's watching who's fairly, let's call it, new to the world of robotics, okay, and specifically to drones. So my question to you in that regard is, if we have someone in the audience watching this, what would you tell these people who are more concerned about things like information security, or weren't concerned about maybe data breaches as it pertains to being watched, or even the information misuse? What kind of security measures are taken in the world of drones to make sure that help people understand that these devices are for the good, to help us, to make our lives easier and more convenient, and even save lives? So what would you say to these people who might be concerned about these aspects of air drones technology?
So if you're asking about what's being done to protect the information and the data, is that the question, Carlos? I want to make sure.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. So I'd say that cyber and robots is still relatively new in terms of how you work with that hardware and software. However, you can absolutely, we call it harden in the world of robotics. We call it harden the robot, right? And make sure that its data is protected. So you start by really doing a vulnerabilities assessment, really understanding where you might have some holes, then doing something they call penetration testing, where you're actually testing and poking holes, so to speak, and then fixing those vulnerabilities. So the fact that we are a dual use company, so we're working with the government and we're working with the civilian sector. The government is, of course, very serious about their data, and of course, many commercial entities are as well. So that's not something to be taken lightly. So it is something that we address, as far as within the design of our robots. It's something that we think about right from the beginning. How is this going to be protected? So I would say, to give somebody out there that's listening some assurance, I would say that the data that's on these things is taken very, very seriously, and absolutely has to be protected.
My question actually goes in line with Carlos, and mine was more in the sense of, one thing is protecting the data that you've collected. My question is more towards the right of being able to collect that data in the first place. How are you able to determine, or what are there any regulations or laws around where the drone is able to fly, what you are able to look for, what you're able to record, et cetera, et cetera? So I think that would be my primary concern, more about the privacy of what happens before you have the data rather than what you're doing with the data. Well, they're both important, but the pre-data, how do you get the permission to have this data in the first place?
Well, Kim, you just opened up a whole nother topic, I think, for Dojo Live that you could probably talk about in one, episode just by itself. There's a whole bunch. That's a whole lot to unpack there. Number one, there is this trust with robots and autonomy, right? And people sometimes confuse autonomy and automation. They're two different things. And automation, just something's being done automatically, but autonomy has a little more brains in it, a little more intelligence, And so going to the question of privacy, which is really still, I would say, a gray area in many cases, is trust, right? So, we working in the public safety sector have spoken to police departments about this. And I'd say that it really depends on where you are. The rules, the laws are different. But in general, there are privacy laws. Like I can't legally take my drone, for example, and fly it over the airspace of your house in most jurisdictions. That's breaking the law. So there are laws. There are a lot of gray areas too. I know that when from a practical standpoint, when the police officer was asked in a smart cities program we were part of about the privacy stuff, he said, "Look, we don't have time for that. We're just trying to help people or catch the bad guy. Really, that's it. We don't have time for this." But there has to be some trust there, and there's facial recognition software. There's all these things out there, right? And it really depends on where you are. An example might be on a military base. Pretty much anything goes. You might as well assume your privacy is gone because you're being watched, right? There might probably a camera.
Right. I think that's an assumption. Unless you're inside your house,
right?
We can now simply assume that we're being recorded somewhere.
If you're in the public domain, it's
yeah.
a free for all. There's cameras everywhere tracking everything. So
yeah, so it is gray in a lot of ways as to really what is what goes and what doesn't go.
Okay, so I just want to unpack a little bit. I see the military or defense applications of this, and people think of drones. Sometimes we think of these little drones or homemade drones, or some of the military drones. They're like $1 billion piece of device, right? Very complex device used in theater applications. So we understand this value in that because you're saving lives. You're putting where normally you would have to send people, you could send drones and do all kinds of reconnaissance work. In the private sector, we could certainly see for construction or engineering purposes, tracking bridges or buildings or what have you to look for anomalies and things of that sort, right? I mean, we had the incidents of what happened in Florida. Could that have been caught earlier? Could that have been avoided? Those are all great questions, and hopefully some of this technology can help answer those questions in a positive way. So where else is this going? We see the commercial application allowing you to get to places that would otherwise put humans at risk. Can it be used for things like scanning? Now that we have a virus that doesn't seem to be wanted to go away, right? Can it be used? Can a similar technology be used to go into a place and scan to see if there's particles in the air? If the coronavirus is in the air, and warn people about it. I mean, what are some of the other applications that this could be used for to improve people's lives, and in many cases save lives?
Yeah, so the applications are endless. If we use the Corona example, there actually are companies that are utilizing drones they're relatively large and they have tanks and they have like Clorox or what have you in them, and they're spraying stadiums, for example, right? So for example, if imagine, if you will, in the future, if this is an application that people go with, but I do know right now they're using these big tanks to spray. But imagine in the future if you had a small fleet of unmanned drones that one would take off or a couple would take off, whatever, and they would start flying a pattern around the stadium, and then as they land on their wireless charging pads, 2 other ones or 3 other ones or whatever the number is take off and continue until they finish the whole thing. That's one example. We actually last year built a prototype with another company that had UV technologies. And the UV technologies, we actually put the sensors on our ground robot. We built in the intelligence into the robot. And the idea was that it would drive around and basically disinfect. Right, and so if it was in an office or school or what have you, that it would disinfect. So those are a couple other use cases where you could use some autonomous robotics, unmanned technology to really be defensive in that case, right? In the case of your direct question about particles, I actually saw. I don't know exactly the answer to that, but I did see a video that somebody in South Korea put out. I think some medical institute. This is right when COVID started, about how the particles travel and things like that. So yeah, theoretically, yes, if you've got a way to detect, now they did it visually. They had like some sort of visual detection, but if you're able to detect it, and then basically say, hey, there's these particles in the air, Theoretically, you could. I haven't seen that done with a drone application, but I don't see why it couldn't be as long as you have the right camera or right sensors on board.
Interesting.
Are you using your drones at all in a delivery sense? I mean, I know that there's probably the commercial sense of like Amazon just dropping the package at your door or whatever. But let's talk about like search and rescue. Let's say someone's lost in the mountains, what you pointed on, no GPS or whatever. The drone is able to find them, but it's still going to take people 2-3 days, let's say, to hike in and rescue or whatever. Mm-hmm. So can your drone, now that they're
I think we lost Kim.
Lost Kim there for a second.
I was wondering if she's like, can you drone deliver those guys pizza or water while they wait?
Yeah. I figured that's where she was going.
I think it was probably the question of, can some of these drones actually be strong enough to be used as a rescue, where they can send you a rope and pull you out of there? I mean, could they be strong enough to do something like that?
Yeah, so there are drones out there that are being built. We're not building one of them. The direction we're going as a company is we want to put the intelligence into all these drones, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many use cases. We do have a small drone that's on our product roadmap. When I say small, it's relatively large still, for these delivery and logistics types of missions that you're talking about. And then if you get specific with, oh, hey, can we lift this person out of here? Instead of a helicopter, there are some heavy lift drones that are being designed that I don't think they've done that ever yet, but they're theoretically, could lift that kind of weight. I'm seeing some drones that can lift, a couple 100 pounds as an example, right? So again, how far can they travel? Well, that's the problem, right? As long as, depending on their propulsion system and some of the better systems out there these days will, go out and, fly for an hour and max, but if you're going out in the mountains and things like that, you probably need a little bit more time than that. It just depends. But the bottom line is this is the future. The future is that, yes, you theoretically should be able to do these things. It's all about the technology. It's all about the use case. It's all about the demand as well. Who's demanding this? Yeah. So, delivery and logistics, absolute no-brainer. Yes, it's happening already on the battlefield. It's happening in the medical world. It's in most cases, it's small little pockets of pilot projects and things like that. But I absolutely seeing it being ubiquitous. There is still a lot of challenges left to get to where it's ubiquitous. Regulatory challenges is probably the biggest one. Right now in the U.S., if you're going to do this sort of thing, you have to be able to merge the national airspace system with what we call the unmanned traffic management system, and that's still a work in progress.
Yeah, I think we had a guess about that AirMap a couple of years ago talking about.
I know those guys. Yeah, that's right. They were pioneers. They were pioneers on that whole idea, and since then, there's been a proliferation of companies that are attacking that world in different ways. But AirMap was definitely a pioneer. For like, hey, the vision. Here's the vision.
Well, we're coming up on time. In fact, we're up on time. But it sounds as though, when it comes to what was otherwise difficult to accomplish with human beings, getting to location, tracking, just the logistics of doing the things that we talked about with drones, and the fact that AI makes them intelligent and the autonomous drones allows to do things that would otherwise be impossible to scale, at least to scale from a human perspective, or even get to. It definitely is creating a better quality of life or improving the management of risk to life with these technologies. So it's fantastic to hear that. Tell us a little bit about, as we come to an end, the company's culture. What kind of people want to come work with you guys? What do you look for?
Yeah, well, we're very fortunate to have, I would say, a great culture, and we have some values and things that really guide us, right? So we look for those kind of people. I'll give you a couple examples. We look for people that are self-starters. They're accountable for themselves but at the same time accountable for themselves, but also good team players. We have a lot of aviation themes in our company. So one of those core values that we have is something called check your six. So if you remember I don't know if you know where that came from, but that came from World War I when we first started seeing fighter planes, people using airplanes to fight, and they couldn't see behind them. So their buddies would say, hey, I got your six. So not check your six, but I've got your six. I've got your six implies I'm going to be there to back you up and help you out, right? So it's really a team, very team team-oriented culture. So we look for team players that will contribute and be part of the solution and aren't necessarily there just for their own individual glory. Individual glory comes along with being part of the team. So.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. Thanks for being with us today. We wish you a lot of success, doing a lot of good here to help improve the lives of people using technology. It's always great to hear that. Just bear with us as we go off the air in just a minute. Carlos, what do we got coming up for the rest of the week?
Thank you, Tulio. We have one more guest. That's tomorrow. Remember, folks, that on Thursday we're not gonna be airing Dojo Live, but tomorrow we'll be speaking with Paul Hanges, the CEO of DipJab, which is a digital entertainment company. The topic is going to be innovating in a box: how to push the limits while remaining true for the business mission. So that's exactly what we'll be discussing tomorrow right here on Dojo Live at 12 p.m. Pacific, folks. So join us and be safe.